When Google turns Privacy Sandbox on, what data will you get? Hello and welcome to Growth Masterminds. My name is John Koetsier. We can be pretty sure that the Google Ad ID is going away at some point. No one knows when. Privacy Sandbox is already out there in the wild, right? But only maybe in 1% of Android devices. Someday, maybe in 2025, Google will flip a switch and that 1% will grow to, let's say, 100%. At that point, what data are you going to get from your marketing campaigns? How will that change? How will things work? To give you a sense of all that, Singular's actually made something. It's called the Privacy Sandbox Simulator, and it'll give you a simulation of what that world will be like. Singular CTO Eran Friedman is going to share it with us right now. Welcome, Eran.
Thank you, John, for having me. Excited to be here.
Pumped to have you back. You're a frequent guest. Super happy about that. Quick note to everybody who might be listening on an audio podcast. I don't know if you know it, Growth Masterminds is also available on YouTube. This one might not be a bad session to watch rather than listen because we are going to be doing some show and tell. First, of course, we have a little bit of conversation. Eran, let's start here. Big picture. What data will Privacy Sandbox provide?
Right. So Privacy Sandbox is basically, the Android version of what we've been seeing on iOS, right, with the whole privacy changes. And there's a lot going on there, honestly, in Android Privacy Sandbox. They actually have multiple APIs or frameworks to provide you all kinds of data for different use cases, everything around advertising and marketing. And the goal for them is essentially to replace the Google advertising ID, right, as we've mentioned. So there's various aspects. If we try to cover like the high level API, so the first is what they call the topics API that's focused mostly for the advertising networks on contextual targeting without using the advertising ID. So that's one aspect. Then the other one is protected audiences API, which is focused on the retargeting use cases. So basically using signals on device to bid on users who already have the app and try to retarget them with ads. And lastly, there's the famous attribution reporting API. It's like the scan for Android in a sense, and it's going to provide data on measuring your marketing campaigns. And that's kind of, I think, the focus for us today.
That's the big picture, and we're going to talk about that attribution reporting API because there's a very interesting choice to be made in Privacy Sandbox. You can get massive amounts of data. In that sense, there's a huge wealth of data points that you can collect from Android Privacy Sandbox that you couldn't get on iOS under Scan or AAK, the new version of Scan. But you have a difficult choice to make because you can either get that huge number of data points or you can get some very, very precise data on a small number. Talk about that.
Yeah, for sure. So I think the analogy to scan or add attribution kit is very helpful because for many people who are a bit familiar with scan know that Apple is kind of like strict with how they've designed scan. There are some famous numbers that they have, for example, that the granularity is like 4 digits as a source identifier, and the conversion values, the famous one, like to understand what's happening post-install, uses this number between 0 and 63. And there's no way to customize your attribution windows, for example. It's all very hard-coded and set. Android Privacy Sandbox, like you've mentioned, took a very different direction. It's relying on similar principles of, like registering a publisher ad and then registering an advertiser app once it's downloaded, and triggering values there, basically registering triggers for values. But the big difference there is it's extremely customizable. There's a lot more that you can use in terms of like ranges of values, both on the granularity level and the trigger values level. You can customize all kinds of attribution windows, exactly what's going to happen, what's going to be sent, how many postbacks after which while, and so forth. Very different from scanning these aspects. But then, as you mentioned, there's a big trade-off there, a big caveat, I would say, that I'm sure everyone is going to talk a lot about around like designing schemas for Privacy Sandbox, and that's noise. Noise is a very famous term in like all the documentation of Privacy Sandbox, and it works under the principle of if you don't have enough volume, then the more granular you try to look into, or maybe in other words, the smaller the segment of users you're trying to analyze, then the more noise is going to be applied to your results. So they're basically going to return some random values there when you're trying to look at the numbers. So it gets to kind of an interesting technical equation there of how to design your schemas there so that depending on the volume that you have, can you go, how granular can you go? Well, knowing that you're going to get some random there, getting some noise, but you'll be pretty confident about the results that you're getting versus whether you need to go like more low granular and look at the numbers at high level. And there's a lot of ways that you can customize the model and design the models to get the most accurate level of data and the most granular level of data. Yes, basically at scale.
It's an interesting world we're living in. On the iOS side, we have privacy thresholds and now crowd anonymity and scan for and add attribution kit. On the Android side, we have noise. And you mentioned the customizability. There's a whackload of customizability you can do here. Of course, the first cousin of customizability is complexity. So maybe share your screen. Let's take a look at the Privacy Sandbox Simulator and let's see how it works. And let's play with some levers. Let's pretend we're different people, different apps, different publishers, and just see what it looks like, what kind of data we can get back, how much noise we're going to have, all that stuff.
For sure. Yeah, so for folks listening in, this is when we're actually sharing my screen. I'm gonna look through some of the example reports, and I provide a bit of like just high level background for this simulator that we're talking about. And I think one of the most common questions I get when I talk with customers or advertisers about Privacy Sandbox is they say, "Okay, we get it. It's complicated. There's a lot of customizations to do. What's the bottom line? How is it gonna look like, right? What exactly do I need to set up? What do I need to, how do I plan for this? And how's the report going to look like in the end?" And that was basically the inspiration behind the simulator. We wanted to make it as easy as possible to understand without getting too much into the weeds, right? Okay, so what we're seeing right now when I'm sharing my screen, we call it the Android Privacy Sandbox Simulator, completely free for all, accessible through our website. And the idea is to basically get the first look into conversion models and exactly how they affect the reporting in Android Privacy Sandbox. So let me just skim through what we have to work with. It's you can see it's a single screen in which I need to design my schema based on some basic details about my app and what I'm looking for. And then it would automatically generate a sample report of what I can expect. And the most critical thing, how the noise is going to affect my data. How much random can I expect to be added? And how confident can I be about the results? So I'll give you just a sample example here just to set things up and play around with it. So let's say I have an app with 1,000 daily app installs. The noise is based on the volume that I'm getting. So the volume is based on app installs for the app. I'm going to choose some KPIs at random, like the number of, I want to measure installs, I want to measure a specific event, I want to measure some revenue, and I can also customize which granular levels I want to see. So I want to choose the source level, which is kind of the media channel, the campaign level, and let's say the country. So I just chose kind of by priority these levels. And you can see that in real time, I'm getting a sample reporting output demonstrating various granular levels and what are the numbers and what's the accuracy level of these numbers.
That's super interesting. And you were probably just going to mention this. I'm looking at revenue, 7-day revenue, and it's estimated at $70, but the plus or minus here is $42. So yeah.
You're completely right. And it just shows in this very high level report, I basically designed a really unoptimized model, honestly, because I can already see here that for the large network, if I'm looking only at the basic source granularity, if I use a large network with pretty decent volume, I'm pretty good in terms of my confidence. I see a 900 installs plus minus 0.8. It's pretty much that number. I see 90 events plus minus 0.4. That's again pretty much that number. And also the revenue for the large network is 630 plus minus $40, which is okay, but pretty, like in relative speaking, that's fine. But the smaller network that you've just mentioned shows very clearly that uh, my revenue is like 70 plus minus 40, which is really not considered that accurate, right? When I'm looking at lower volume channels, it's going to be hard to trust the revenue that I'm looking at with this conversion model.
And what that means is you're going to have the exact same scenario on Android that we've seen on iOS for the past 2 years. If you're going to run campaigns, you need to run sufficient volume through each partner, correct?
That's exactly right. There's definitely going to be practices and requirements by various media networks that you need to have at least that amount of installs per day, per campaign to get to accurate enough results. And similar to that we have in iOS, we're probably going to see the same on Android to really trust the data.
Okay, so we're going to run through a bunch of scenarios. We're going to look at different types of apps that rely on ad monetization, apps that have iApps, mixed models. We're going to look at apps with subscriptions and free trials, and we're going to try and design setups for Privacy Sandbox that are going to maximize return signal and minimize noise. Before we jump into that, what we see on the left hand of our screen, let's talk about that a little bit. We almost are missing a little bit at the very top there. We've got app volume. That's how many downloads you're getting, and you can set it from 100 to 1,000, 10,000, 100,000 daily, which is, it gets big. So
Mm-hmm.
events, talk about events and breakdowns here. Events are the things you want to measure, and breakdowns are how you want to get back the data. Is that correct?
That's exactly right. And there's also some differences and nuances between them. Of course, these are advanced complexities that we're going to simplify on our end. But if you look at the events, like the post-install events, there's also different types of events. If you're just looking at the KPI of, whether my sign-up was completed successfully, you're going to go through some of the use cases. For example, that's like a single event. It's whether it happened or not, right? How many signups do they have, or whether this user made the sign-up or not, passed through the sign-up or not, versus a revenue event that talks about, like, the total purchases, for example, of that user and so forth. So the different type of event, whether it's an event-based event or a value-based event, would be also very meaningful to get those results.
It's interesting because we can play with this, right? Even with the scenario that you just sort of randomly chose. So let's say I don't care about installs. I think I'm going to get that data because I can see what's happening in my app. I can talk to my partners and stuff like that. I just want, maybe I have like an event that I know is, it's indicative of getting a great user. I could go all in on events. What does that change in terms of my noise level?
For sure. So first of all, let's try it out, right? Let's say that I'm not prioritizing installs that much. Honestly, installs are also pretty cheap in Privacy Sandbox terms. I don't need a lot of priorities to get like a accurate data about installs. But let's say I have a specific event that's critical for me, and let's say that I don't care about the revenue for my first test with Privacy Sandbox, for example. I can put like 90% of my budget, it's called, like my priority on events, 10% on the install because I gotta have something. And that would make my numbers very, very accurate on the event basis. And I think beyond the current screen that we see, which is kind of easy to be honest, and I'm looking only at the channel level, that also enables me to go deeper in my granular level, as I go to the campaign level, for example, as I'm pointing out right now, and see all that breakdown also for more granular reports. So right now I'm looking at the campaign level, see that my events are still extremely accurate, right? I'm looking at 2 plus minus 0.1. That's very, very accurate for a small campaign. And I can even try to dive deeper to my country level data. So if I go for the third report, now you see that things are getting, okay, a bit on the yellow side for some of those campaigns, but it just shows that most of my campaigns are in pretty good shape because I've put a lot of focus there. And I can also play around with the breakdowns in a second to try to optimize that granularity as well. So a lot of it is around like playing with the priorities.
I love this. I just sort of randomly asked that because I was interested when I saw that. We hadn't talked about that in advance. This shows how you can customize. This shows how you can customize. If you know in your app, because you know your app and you know your users, that matters or this matters, you can focus in on that. That's something you can't do on iOS. On iOS, I mean, you have a conversion model, of course, but you can't like throw all your ducks in one thing the way you can here and get that kind of customizability.
You're completely right. Those percentage points that we're talking about, like splitting my budget in a sense between those KPIs, that's not something you can do on iOS. And here you can literally plan your values to dedicate a certain portion to this point and another portion for that point, and even get it to the granular level, saying, okay, countries are very important for me, then use more of the budget to get that granularity versus other granular levels for that matter.
Wow. Okay. I'm just now starting to, I mean, I've been playing with this for a while, but I'm just now starting to understand kind of the power here that that customizability allows you. Let's play a little bit. Let's refresh and let's say, hey, maybe I'm a high volume subscription app with a short trial. So high volume, I'm not sure. It's at least 10,000 installs a day. Maybe
Yep.
it's more. You choose.
Mm-hmm.
And I have it's a subscription. Maybe I'm in the fitness area or something like that, and I have a 3-day trial or something like that. What would we do for that scenario?
Right. So let's walk through this. So let's say I have 10,000 installs per day. So it's pretty substantial, large volume app, like as you mentioned. And again, probably have to look at installs, but I don't really need that much budget for it. That trial event is going to be critical for me, like whether you pass the trial or not after 3 days or after 7 days, whatever it is. I want to definitely dedicate a portion of the volume there, but maybe have like multiple packages that I can choose from, and that would decide on the purchase value from there, and maybe that would be critical for me to see the revenue coming from it, right? So I'll probably dedicate some of the budget for revenue buckets as well. We're gonna see some of the again nuances around like playing with the most optimized model. I'm not sure that this one actually would be the best one, but you're gonna play around with it. So then I need to choose my breakdown. Source is pretty critical, pretty cheap to use. Then source and campaign, and let's say that a campaign is very critical for me. And countries, I don't know, maybe I'm just in the US, for example. So
Or since you're a
it's just
fitness
fine.
app, you're going to have people sign up and you're going to get country anyways.
For example, yes, that would be kind of a good idea. So okay, so basically I've configured my breakdowns and my events, trying to look at the reports. I can already see, like just walking through this. So at the source level, I got pretty good accuracy. I see pretty much everything is on the green, right? Like see I'm getting good number of installs, good number of events, good revenue as well. Everything green, pretty accurate. I see like here it's like 700 plus minus $62, so that's around 10%, give or take. So pretty, I should feel pretty confident about those numbers. But as we said, the campaign of it is really critical for us. So let's check it out, and we say, okay, that this actually looks pretty decent, right?
Not
Everything
bad.
is, yeah, mostly on the green side. I see that for the smallest campaign, it might be a bit trickier. It's 140 plus minus, 18. It's okay, but I can again probably optimize it even further. Like if I give a bit more budget to the revenue instead of the events, I can see how it affects my accuracy level. Even for the smallest campaigns, here we go. I already optimized my campaign pretty easily and see that for that conversion model schema with these budgets, I'm able to get to even more accurate revenue, even for the smaller campaigns. And that
Even the
looks like a
tiniest
pretty good
one,
model for me.
you're less than
If
10% variance. Nice.
exactly, exactly. So here, this is kind of a bit of the thinking around like the design planning of, okay, where do I need to focus most of my values in, and what are the different breakdowns I can pair on with to focus on my use case.
So that's super useful. You can just change your assumptions. And I know, and I don't even know if you can talk about this, but I know some Google people have asked to look at this, and I think I'm sure they haven't officially given a seal of approval, but at least they haven't said don't release that. It's awful. So that's good. So you get a sense, hey, this is what you'd get. It's pretty accurate. Let's try another one. Let's say I'm a low volume. I'm an indie producer, right? I'm an indie publisher. I have a low
Mm-hmm.
volume game. So maybe, it's probably more than 100, maybe not though. Maybe let's say 100. Like, let's say it's 100 installs. I'm just starting
Yep.
out, 100 installs a day. I do have in-app purchases. What do we do in that scenario?
Yep. So, in these cases, this is going to be the tough one, right? I'm an indie developer, just started, I'm running my first campaigns. In that case, I really need to prioritize and think very carefully about what are the most important things for me as a developer. And you're saying I'm also having a purchases. That means I have a revenue event. Revenue events require more of the budget to get to accurate levels. So I need to probably play around with it a bit more carefully to understand what's more important for me. Now, typically, those indie game developers, they have certain events that are interesting for them, but revenue is a bit more critical for them, right? The revenue coming from purchases, so they can optimize based on ROAS. So I'm going to choose installs. Again, not going to put too much focus there. Events, I'm just going to put kind of, try to minimize the budget for there and just put all my focus on revenue for that matter. And in breakdowns, again, just starting, maybe focus on a specific geo to see how it looks like. I'm going to put some budget on my source level and the rest on the campaign level, trying to just optimize the most of my of the data that I have to work with. Now, you can already see that I'm basically loaded the default reporting on the campaign level, and you already see that it's pretty tough for me to get pretty accurate results because
Yep.
at very low volumes, 100 installs per day, the smallest campaign might generate like 2 installs. I have $1. I'm being killed by the noise here, right? It's very
Yes.
hard to get to accurate levels, and you see that across your revenue, right? It's hard to get to revenue values at the campaign levels. I can check maybe the source level. Yeah, I see the source level is pretty terrible as well, because the noise is demolishing me. Perhaps something I can try to optimize towards is reduce the budget on the campaign level and add more of the budget to the source level. Just saying, okay, give me just something accurate I can rely on. And I see
Hmm.
that I made a difference here. I can see
Yep.
that now my Amplitude report shows that for the large network, I'm getting 90 installs per day, and I got $63 plus minus 5. Okay, that's workable. That's less than a 10% difference. For the small network, it's still going to be tough. So you
Yep.
see basically that the 100 installs per day, it's a pretty challenging one to work with, and I need to think very carefully about what type of events I can use and what type of breakdowns I can actually rely on.
Ultimately, I think what we're seeing here is that if you're at 100 installs per day and you are kicking off paid UA, pick a partner. Pick a partner.
For
As
sure.
what if we switch it to a thousand? So our indie publisher has grown up. It's 6 months later. They've gotten some positive momentum. We switch to 1,000 app installs a day. What are we seeing now?
Yeah, let's see. Everything is looks much better now. So the reporting updated at the source level on the green. Basically, very low levels of noise now. I can see my results for the large network, for the small network. And if I try to dive deep, it actually provides me more room for granularity, right? So I can reduce a bit the budget for the source level and add more in the campaign level. And let's see how it looks like now. I'm just gonna update my model. Okay, see that the small networks to the source level still finds it a bit challenging. And the campaign level, well, I can see the large campaigns here, but the
Yep.
small ones still have too much noise here. So again, it's probably still not the most optimized model, and I want to play around with those budgets to get to even more granular details.
This is super helpful. I was going to run through a couple other simulations here, but you know what? Let's try at least one more. We've done
Okay.
subscription, we've done in-app purchases. I want to do ad monetization. So now let's say,
Mm-hmm.
hey, we're a casual games publisher, and
Mm-hmm.
we're monetizing with ads, and we have medium volume, so we're at least 1,000 installs a day. I'm not sure if we're at 10K. You decide, Iran, what you think that medium sounds like. But we want to know what's going on. So we're casual game. We monetize with ads. We have medium install volume. What should we do?
Yeah. So I think the part of the benefits, I think, for hyper casual games actually, or the casual games, is they usually have higher volumes of installs. Actually, the CPIs are usually lower, and they can get more volume from these, and they usually rely on like higher volumes, honestly, per campaign. So typically a medium, casual app, I could imagine how they might get to that 10 level range. I would say if they've kind of scaled a bit, we can play around with it. So basically, with a casual game that relies a lot on ad revenue, they'll definitely want to look at the ad revenue as a KPI, right? So you still start from the installs, and they'll probably want to put like all the rest of the budget around the revenue for sure. It's going to be critical for them. There's probably areas that they can also optimize that we're not getting into, on like the how much after the install they want to get the data. The default is after 7 days, but you can also play around with it a bit. Maybe their initial user experience, if it's a hyper casual game, maybe the first 3 days are enough. Or if it's a like more of like a longer term casual game, then maybe you need like a larger cohort. So you can probably play around with it even further. And then the breakdowns, typically the granularity level is really critical for them. So we try to play around with it a bit, maybe put 10% on source, 20% on campaign. I try to push that country to the maximum level. So I put here like, even I try to optimize even further. Say country level has 80% of my budget. And you know what? You see that I actually got pretty decent results for 10,000 installs, right? So you can see actually pretty granular data at the country level that is pretty green. Like I see pretty accurate results. In the smaller networks, I see like ranges of like $100 plus minus $6. The smallest campaign is generated with just 50 installs per day. Still was able to get to $35 of revenue plus minus 7. So I think I would say this report is pretty decent. Probably what I would try to aim for.
It's very clear that if you have high volume, you're going to get pretty good data from Privacy Sandbox. If you have low volume, you've got to work for it. And you've probably got to minimize the number of campaigns and the number of partners, but you're probably going to get some decent data even if you do that. Super interesting. This kind of made it real for me, which I think is why you guys built the simulator.
Yes, exactly that. Again, like it's there's a lot of technical details around Privacy Sandbox, and everything that we didn't even get to was like what are the range of values that you can use, and this budget concept, and all those percentages, and the trade-offs between granularity and the events. But again, we try to make it as easy as possible to just imagine what you're gonna get in the end. And again, there's still a lot of things that I think we can do even further. But hopefully it provides like a good initial picture.
Talk to some people who are listening in, and what do you suggest they do with the simulator? Should they just jump on there, start playing around? Should they get a team of people on it? Should they just, who should do that? Talk about that in general.
Yeah, for sure. So yeah, my first recommendation is if you're interested in APS and you're trying to understand again how to plan for it, how to think about the schema, just jump straight in. It can get very easily to throw a website and try playing around with it a bit. I think it really helps you understand again the different levers that you have to pull and what you can expect for the level of scale that you have. I don't think you need like a full team of analysts to try to play around with it. Like you can just start, just check how it looks like, and it will help you understand, okay, what you're going to deal with.
Awesome. If you're looking for that, I'll put the URL on screen and in the description, but you can just simply go to singular.net, mouse over resources, slide your mouse down to Android Privacy Sandbox Simulator, click on it, and you will get access there. Probably a good idea to do this on desktop, not on mobile, but I think, a tablet would do as well. So there's your clues there. We've been talking about ARA, Attribution Reporting API. It has a very complex data flow that we haven't even talked about. Aggregation servers, keys, lots of different things and pieces and components here. Do marketers need to know all that stuff? Do they need to pay attention to it? Does Singular have an easy button for them?
Yeah, so the short answer is we're definitely planning for the easy button in that case, because yes, it's definitely pretty complicated and there are many nuances there. I think we're just trying to keep it simple for the marketers. Like even that simulated, we try to make it as easy as possible to understand. You understand that there's a lot of thinking you have to do, planning you have to do around like playing around with those budgets and percentage points. In the future, like how we're thinking about the product, we want to make it again as imagine the most seamless way to just start with Privacy Sandbox. So we want not only enable you to customize the model, but also give you the optimized model for your use case, right? Okay, so we know you're an admon-based casual indie game with this level of volume. Here's the default model that everyone starts with, right? Try it out, right? And of course, you can play around and change, but I think that would be kind of a good start. And then from that point, our SDK would take care of everything. We would trigger those values accordingly. We would work with all the aggregation service, get those posts back directly, pass the reports, and show you that report that we just saw here in the website, showing your installs, your events, your revenue, your RAWs, and enable you to optimize your campaigns.
Music to my ears, music to my ears. Make it simple. Here's a simulator. Obviously, on the iOS side, you've had this build your conversion model tool for quite some time, which just does all that stuff. I'm assuming on Android, there'll be the same thing in the singular backend. Build your conversion model. Here you go. We'll handle it through the SDK. Love it. That makes perfect sense. Let's land the plane here. We've been talking about unified measurement at Singular for quite some time. We called it hybrid measurement initially. We landed on unified measurement. We saw a big release on that recently on the iOS side, massive increases in granularity, massive increases in quality of data that you're getting back. Talk a little bit about unified measurement in general, how it applies to Android as we're shifting marketing management because we're losing device identifiers.
Yeah, for sure. So it's funny to think about it, but all the session we had just now is focused on just a single data set that you're gonna get from Privacy Sandbox on Android, right? And that might already seem a bit complicated, but the truth is that it's actually one of multiple data sets that you're gonna get on Android. And you actually have to think about how to join these all together. So similar to iOS, in which we have and this was kind of the design for our unified measurement kind of approach. While in iOS, you have scan, you have IDFA still as opt-ins, you also have probabilistic. You also have certain networks with their own measurement, like App or Chat, which is none of the above. So we really had to build this unified report that combines all this together, shows them side by side in a single report, and gets to the bottom line number, this unified number across all these to get you like the consistent ROAS, deduplicated performance across your campaigns. So that exists already on iOS, and we're very happy about this report, and its adoption has been insane. Now we're also thinking about how it's going to look like on Android, and we're seeing the same complexities. So you're going to get the batched aggregate reports from Privacy Sandbox based on the attribution reporting, but we're probably going to have some portion maybe of opt-in advertising IDs, depending on how Google will decide to deprecate it. We might have also refers to remain with us. So one time someone clicks an ad to the Play Store, they pass a refer that we might also still be able to get. And also there's a bunch of other alternative measurement methods. Meta has their own meta refer, preload campaigns by Digital Turbine and others have their own kind of thing. So it's probably going to be a mix of data sets that we want to combine together the same principles of the unified measurement to a single report. So we see across all these different data sets, across all these attribution methods, a bottom line number to understand what's your overall performance on Android as well.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Thank you so much for this time. Really appreciate it. And I was excited about the simulator before. I'm way more excited now because I understand it. I understand the power of being able to figure out just in a simulator version what it looks like, how it works, what should I do? Should I add more here, add a little less here? What will I get? Super useful. It's on the Singular website right now. Check it out. Thank you, Eran.
Thank you, John.